Families in Gaza are mourning. This funeral is for Yasser al-Nabahin. He and his 3 children, Muhammad, Dalia and Ahmed, were killed in the Beit Hanun home by an Israeli airstrike. Not far away, other Palestinians are surveying the damage. Some have set up temporary shelters, others are trying to salvage their possessions.
3 years, 3 wars, and we suffer. Every time they bombed the house from a different side. Once from the east, once from the west, once from the north. And every time they ask us to leave. And every time we suffered great fear.
The cause, Israel says, a hunt for leaders of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Israel and its allies call them terrorists. But the relatively small armed resistance group enjoys support among Palestinians. The effect? Heavy aerial and artillery attacks on neighborhoods in Gaza and retaliatory rocket fire into Israel. Egypt mediated the ceasefire between Israel and the Islamic Jihad with support from the UN and Qatar. Islamic Jihad has told Al Jazeera that as part of the deal, it has been assured that senior members held in Israeli jails will be released, something that Israel denies.
We have a very clear decision that without releasing Khalil al-Awawda and Bassam al-Saadi, there will be no ceasefire agreement. That will be a break for the agreement from the Israeli side, and the fight will be continued.
For Gazans living under decades of illegal occupation in an open-air prison, the latest ceasefire is just that, a brief pause until the next attacks. Yumna Sayed, Al Jazeera, Gaza.
Well, earlier I spoke to Lynn Hastings, who's the UN humanitarian coordinator for the occupied Palestinian territory. She says a long-term solution is needed.
The entire situation is a tragedy. Our first concerns right now are, of course, that the ceasefire must hold. There are children who have been growing up in Gaza and have endured the repercussions of 5 wars. I just want to say that both Israelis and Palestinians need to be able to feel safe. Palestinians need to be able to exercise their rights to movement, to education, to be able to get access to health care, and to be able to have jobs. Every time there's an escalation, these goals are set back for both Israelis and Palestinians. Going back to the beginning of August here is not normal. Going back to pre-May 2021, during which there was another escalation, that's not normal either. We really need to be looking for longer-term solutions here.
But even outside of the latest strikes, how does the continuing Israeli siege affect Palestinian lives?
Well, I think a number of the pictures that you've already shown demonstrate that, and some of the things that I've said demonstrate that, just in terms of being able to exercise the rights that you and I and so many of us are able to enjoy all of the time. They don't have freedom of movement. They're unable to access economy. They often are not able to access their health care, all of the things that most of us, or many of us at least, are able to take for granted.
At least 45 Palestinians, including 16 children, have been killed. How do you think that can be justified?
Well, according to international law, of course, children should never be put in harm's way. Anybody who is engaged in any type of hostilities needs to ensure that the use of force is proportionate to the circumstances. I also want to point out, of course, that the use of indiscriminate weapons, especially if they're coming from well-populated residential areas and landing in well-populated residential areas, are contrary to international law.
Israeli forces have demolished Palestinian homes during a raid in the occupied West Bank. Bulldozers, accompanied by Israeli forces, destroyed 2 houses in the village of Rumaneh near Jenin. One that belonged to the grandfather of a 20-year-old Palestinian who was accused of killing 3 Israelis in early May. Well, Rumaneh is 17 kilometers northwest of the Palestinian city of Jenin. The village is home to around 6,500 people. Ida Ibrahim sent this report from the demolition site in Rimane.
This is what remains of the Sbihat family home after Israeli forces raided the Rumane village and demolished the house. It belongs to the family of a 20-year-old Palestinian who has been accused by Israel of killing 3 Israelis in an attack in May. The grandfather, Subhi Sbihat, says this was his dream home. He worked abroad for 30 years and it was his dream to come back here and build a 3-story house. But now him and 16 other members of his family are homeless.
The destruction of this building here only increased hatred and not fear. Me, my children and grandchildren are not afraid. They are sowing the seeds of hatred amongst the new generation. I told the Israeli commander, all occupations will come to an end.
The house of 19-year-old Asad al-Rifa'i has been demolished as well. Both men were detained in Israel after a 3-day manhunt. The families here say they had no idea of their son's intentions. I'm joined here now by the uncle of Asad al-Rifa'i, Mr. Abdullah. I want to ask you, can you rebuild this house?
We can't even remove the rubble before we get the approval of the Israeli occupation. We can't rebuild the house. Now, 8 family members have lost their home and have nowhere to go.
Many here are telling us that they're following the news of the latest Israeli escalation on the besieged Gaza Strip. And they say even when a ceasefire has been reached, the Israeli occupation, its violations and its measures are still ongoing.